Hey everybody, welcome. We're going to talk about projecting player salaries. So, I'm not going to go into the details of the auction rules. I think each of that deserves its own video as well. Let's just talk about how to project player salaries. What I have up right here is I mentioned this before in a prior video. This is the 2019 card set. Back then when we first this is in early 2020 or 2021, I think we started thinking about an auction league and started sort of putting it together and got to the point where I thought it'd be helpful for some of the league members to see, my take on salaries back then. So these are not the current players, not the current cards, but you get an idea. Say I had Mahomes at the time up there at a value of 91. I don't know. I don't know if a quarterback should go at 91. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you see the peak values were up around 90, 80, 70, up in that range. I've been playing rotisserie baseball for a long time. I don't play it now, but I did a lot in the 90s in college. Um, and then adapted rotisserie baseball in 1995 or 96 to fantasy football and started a league then, an auction league, a large league for fantasy with 16 franchises. It's still going today, almost 20, is it 30 years? I don't know how long the hell it's been. It's almost 30 years later. Um, and he adopted that system for that league in the mid 90s. And now we're doing this for Strat, again, using that same system. So I've been through a lot of auctions. I have a good idea of what the player values are typically, but not Strat. I mean, the thing about fantasy and rotisserie is you're projecting ahead. How's that guy going to do this year? You don't know. So that, of course, is a very different component versus the Strat cards that we have in our hand. That being said, the Strat cards in our hand is just a part of why you're valuing somebody as they are. The ideal person is somebody that you keep for the entire contract, that you see value in the entire way. So you are, to a certain extent, projecting how this player is going to do, because when you're able to keep a player and make them yours because the salary is a value. In other words, if they went back in the auction a couple of years later and you had somebody for 20 and now they're worth 40, that's $20 of quote unquote value. $20 you would have had to spend it. Now you can spend on somebody else. So there is sufficient commonality among rotisserie baseball, fantasy football, and what we're doing now to have some of those values that I observed over the years come into what you're seeing here. And basically what you're seeing is that star players are up around $50. Doesn't mean they have to be. Bid whatever you want, okay? But that's how I sort of valued them here. And when I went through this, I valued a bunch of players. I mean, I think I pretty much valued everybody. Let's see, 1320. So that would have been sufficient for like a 30-team league or something. And spent a grand total. You see the sum right down here of 15,600 auction points. So I don't remember how many teams we had exactly, how many roster spots, and then therefore how much the total salary pool was. But this was a relatively balanced look, and you can see the values start going down, and again you get to these 20 some dollar players are still good players. Okay, Kareem Hunt was in there at 29. Brandon Sheriff was in there at 29. So you still have good players because remember the average player is just under 12. Okay, so if the average player is just under 12, these guys obviously are above average players. Gus Edwards at 27, Mostert at 27, Eckler at 27. Okay, and you can see slowly but surely we work our way down. And finally, you get to a mess. If you're going to have anybody above 12 on average, you're going to get a mess of small dollar guys. So, first and foremost, I think the first thing to remember is what stars generally go for. Okay, and that's going to be a bona fide star should be around 50. Good players should be in the upper 20s into the 30s. Really good players, pretty good player about 20. And then the teens, you start getting pretty mediocre. Now, there's something you need to think about, right? We are valuing the entirety of these rosters, okay, well, I guess let's go to auction facts here. We're valuing 24 teams with 46 roster spots, so 1,104 players, 13,080 points is what we've settled in at. Well, all these spots, these 1,104 spots, 46 players per team, 24 teams, you really can't value them the same either, because you're only going to be playing, 22 of them roughly, barring injury, right? Very consistently. And you have some special teams guys too, right? So let's just call it 22. Those first 22 slots, you're not going to have an average value of $12. A lot of your money is going to be pushed into that top 22, right? So you sort of need to think about that. Well, all right, 22, 24 teams. These first 528 players, roughly half, right, of the auction, those guys aren't going to be 11.8 per player. They're going to be much higher than that, right? How much higher? And then the bench will get less money, as really for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's not much value in holding depth. Even if we have multi-game injuries, there's not much value in it, but you need to value it to a certain degree. If you're looking to win a championship, depth could be the make or break of whether you win that championship or not. And that's really the objective, to win championships. So you have to allocate some to your depth, of course, but then the rest you're going to allocate to bargain hunting, right? And you don't want to have all $1 players to be bargain hunter, because you're not going to get the bargains that you want. You want to have sufficient salary to bid, $9, $10, $11, around there, for the players who aren't going to get on your team this year and you're starting 22, but you think are going to be in your starting 22 next year, the year after. You need to allocate that kind of money for them. So it's not like the rest is $1 players. So this concept of starting 22 is important. Not all of these 1,104 roster spots should be valued equally in your mind. Those 22 stand out for each team. We have in our workbook this auction worksheet. I enhanced it a little bit more now in this version 2.5, which I'll post up shortly. This lets you go in and project right now over the next month. We have a whole month until the auction now. What your player values are. Okay. And a lot of us probably aren't really going to touch this until at least the first week of the NFL, and we see some guys playing and how they're doing. One of the downsides of having a late auction is that we get a pretty decent sample size of a few weeks of NFL action. That's going to help shape our values. Okay. Valuing everybody right now, going to change a lot after 3 weeks of the NFL season. So anyway, whenever you may do it, whether it's now, whether it's later, or whenever it may be, I'll start doing it now, and then I'll continually modify. You go into auction pool session 1, you see the list of all the players that are available. You see a projected salary here, and you punch in the projected salary for each of those players. Well, Tom Brady, he's obviously a star quarterback with a very good card. You tell me where you rank his card among the players out there. Is he a $50 player? Well, I don't know. Is he because he's so old, is he a $40 player? Is he going to the 30s? Or would you bid upper 20s? Because you may not get another card. Maybe you get one more after this, right? Something to think about. Maybe you like the fact that he's an older player and that you can get him at a bargain. That means you can spend more money elsewhere. In any event, put a number here. Let's call it 40. Herbert, obviously younger, star player, one of the best quarterbacks out there. Let's call him, 59. Patrick Mahomes, do you like Mahomes better than Herbert? Good question. I'll say, for the sake of argument, no. I'll call it 57. Josh Allen has some Stratomatic carding troubles, clearly. Is that going to continue? Let's assume that it does, and we'll put him a little bit behind the other guys. 55. Derek Carr, not the youngest guy, just signed a long-term deal, though, a couple years, 3 years. Let's call him, let's say 54. Okay. I don't know. You'll be able to work this out and go through. As you do this, as you go player by player, the auction worksheet over here is going to note that you've allocated 5 players so far at $265 total dollars, and an average player of 53. Okay, fine. But as you go through, And like you saw in the previous sheet over here, right? And you get down, you're going to need to start valuing people lower so that when you get to the end, you have the proper number of players allocated, 1,104, right? So I've allocated 5. That means I have 1099 left to value. And I have 12,815 of salary to do it. Well, I want to offer 2 other things to keep in mind. One, when you look at this total salary, 13,080, right? And I have 12,815 left based on the players that I have sort of projected so far. You have to keep in mind that everybody's going to spend all their points. There's going to be some left over. So how much left over? Few percentage points at least. Okay, a few percentage points at least are going to be left over. People sort of socking away dollars to make sure they get the low dollar guys that they want. So big deal, you get him at 5 instead of 3, right? You want that guy, you're willing to pay 5 for him because you think he's going to be worth 25 next year or the year after, right? So a lot of guys will sock away a little bit of money to make sure they get the lower price guys they want, or at least have a good shot at them. That is going to inevitably lead to some leftover dollars. They're going to fill out the roster and they're going to have some left over. So you don't need to allocate every single penny of 12,815. You might want to say, okay, if I can target, extra 300, you name it, right? You do a little bit of math on it. And 300 at the end, that'll be right. 300 leftover points. Okay. And that, of course, is going to bring up the average player actually allocated above. Bring it down. Bring it down by that amount. So keep in mind, number 1, going to be some leftover salary at the end that some of the owners don't spend. Number 2, keep in mind positions. Okay. Positions need to be distributed somewhat reasonably. I have gone through and I haven't even thought about this in any detail. I did this 5 minutes ago and just threw some numbers out there. I have 0 linebackers allocated. So don't pay attention to the actual numbers I have in here. But how many quarterbacks do you think are going to go? Well, you can't, for example, put a value to every single LB in the LB section down here, okay, which is, let's see, group 14. In the LB section all the way down here. I'm not going to allocate every single one of these because if you did, remember, there's a total of 1,599 players that are available for auction. We're only going to be auctioning off 1,100 of them. So there's 500 guys you're going to say are not going to be auctioned. Got to figure out who they are. Which 500? Well, part of that is going to be, well, do I have a reasonable allocation? Yes, of how the positions are going to be distributed. So I'm guessing there's going to be 44 quarterbacks all day that are, right now anyway. Again, I just plugged this in here. Each of us can only draft 2, or auction 2 that have above 100 attempts. Okay. Then we can draft as many under 100 that we want. So you got to keep that in mind. So there's some limitations. Kickers is only going to be 24, max of 1. Okay, so we know that for a fact. I assume it's going to be 24 for punters as well. So this sort of needs to hold together. You see that I've already allocated those quarterbacks before. It's already automatically populated here how many I allocated. Any blue cells that you see here, any blue cells are cells that you should go ahead and these are the numbers that you can actually play with. You don't want to touch the black cells. The black cells are calculating things for you. That's how this automatically populated the 5 quarterbacks that we allocated over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let's do a 6 for the heck of it. Type in 40. Now it's going to show 6 have been allocated. Okay. What was our target? 44. When you add up all of your targeted players by position, here's this little targeted sum for you to make sure that you have the right number of roster spots in sum across all the positions. Okay. So, why is this important? Talk about the why. Remember, we only have 30 seconds. All of us are going to nominate a bunch of players. It goes into a pool. The computer picks from that pool of nominated players who's up next. There's no delay. The computer's automatically doing it. So the first guy gets nominated. We have 30 seconds to get our bid in. Boom, he's done. Next guy's automatically pops up. Boom, another 30 seconds. You don't have time to figure out values in the auction itself. You need to have something like this nearby to know what range, what you expect that value to be. Will your value change as time goes on? Sure. If there's 2 quarterbacks left that you like, right? And that's it. Out of the 10 that you liked, only 2 are left or 1 is left. You're going to push the value of that guy up higher. But you go in here and say, okay, well, my guidance for Derek Carr is 54. He's the last quarterback I like left. I haven't been spending much money. Okay, I might bet 65 for him. But you at least need to have this barometer there to be able to guide you in that only 30 seconds. Can't have blanks. Can't have blanks. You'll be left out to dry. Know this. This is not daunting. Millions of people have played rotisserie baseball. Millions of people have played fantasy football auction that moves just as fast and as hard as this. I play with lots of different people, very diverse set. Stratomatic football players generally have a pretty high tolerance for being able to handle high levels of strategy, numbers, probabilities, all the rest beyond that of your typical fantasy football player. So we can handle this, guys. Not an issue there. Just got to familiarize yourself with the concepts that we're talking about right here. I'm going to end it there. Keep it short and sweet. I'm going to post this worksheet version 2.5 workbook up so you have access to this position breakdown. Remember, there is a whole month. I think it's really important. Yes, begin doing your values. I would suggest begin doing your values now. I'm going to, and then I'm going to actively modify and continue to refine over the next month. Just need to go in. Let's see. Tyron Smith got hurt yesterday. Okay, well, maybe he retires. It's going to knock him out. I don't know. He's a 6'7", however. So should he be 6'7", 6'7"? If he's really gone, maybe 19, 18, 17, or should he be in his 20s? Because there's not many 6'7s out there. Hey, those are the sorts of things that you're gonna deal with over the next month as you adjust your values. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on another video soon.